All right, man. So the very first thing I want to know is when you heard that I was doing this project talking about disability and masculinity specifically, what kind of sparked your interest to say, hey, I want to be a part of this?
Just knowing that it's something that needs to be talked about because so often as people with disabilities, we aren't even looked at as sexual beings half the time. I know that's something I had to grow into. And so I've seen a lot of conversations around the experience of being an adult with disability and a lot of conversations around what it means to be a man, but never something that brought the two together. So I feel like that's awesome. And I love the conversation that you're having around it, even before that you started this show, the conversation that you were having around it prior to online. I think it's so important. And just happy to and share a little bit about my journey uh, when it comes to figuring out what it means to be a man while also having a disability. So,
Yeah, man. So I think we have to start with the very first and what I think is like the most obvious question. So, are you somebody who has a disability?
I am. So, Nathan, you know this. I have the same disability that you do. We both have cerebral palsy, and I actually have spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy and use a wheelchair. And there are many different types of CP, as you know.
Yeah. And so, from your perspective, what does it mean to be a man?
Man, talk about a loaded question. But I think being a man means somebody who it's more than just age, obviously. Um, Being a man means taking responsibility for yourself and your emotions, um, and doing the work to explore those and learn more about yourself while also being willing to be vulnerable and knowing when it's okay to discuss certain things and when it's not, and creating those boundaries. That's not something that children do. So to me, that's what being a man means. Also, um, leading well, whether it's in a romantic sense or not, and really just taking responsibility for the direction of one's life. Um, and that could also apply to being a woman as well. I think it just applies to adulthood, but definitely to the experience of being an adult with disabilities. You know this, Nathan. You and I have talked about this many times. I got to the point where I had to realize that definitely from a work perspective, and I think you've realized this as well, we have to do things differently and we have to step up and give ourselves opportunities. Otherwise, they won't come. So,
Mm. Yeah. So, with that kind of being your view of what it means to be a man, now I want to kind of understand how has your disability and your relationship with your disability impacted how you view your identity as a man?
mm, that's interesting. I think I'm in a unique spot because of my disability and the experiences that I've experienced because of it. Not saying that I'm unique because of my disability. I think my experience is somewhat universal amongst people with disabilities, but I think it's given me the opportunity to put myself in other people's shoes really well. And I see past any sometimes external behaviors and into really the heart of people for who they truly are. I think the way I've been treated my entire life because of my disability has played into that. It's also given me um, the opportunity, as I talked about earlier, to be self reflective and to do a lot of that tough emotional work, and also the opportunity to be vulnerable with people as well and realize, you know what? Real leaders lead from a place of vulnerability and know how to and when to use that. So I think that's part of it.
And what would you say has been the hardest part of living in the world as a man with a disability?
I think just the fact that you're discounted, both from a personal and professional perspective, because no matter what, uh, gender roles aside, I truly believe that if a woman feels like, she wants to have a career and do things outside the home, she should do that. But there also is something still innate in me that feels like I'm supposed to be a husband and a father someday, and I want to be able to provide for my partner and potentially a family. And that's really hard because, as we talked about earlier, a lot of those professional opportunities, because I need some physical help day to day that doesn't exist, and I'm working on uh, trying to provide a solution for myself and others, as we talked about off air. Maybe we'll get to that in a little bit, but it's really hard to provide, and I find, at least for myself, um, that the two sides of my life that I'm struggling with the most, my personal life, meaning romantic relationships, and my professional life, are linked. And as I think this sums it up perfectly, a conversation I had with my dad recently, and I told him, I'm like, look, it's really hard for me to even want to try and build a life with someone else when I haven't even been able to be successful building a life for myself yet. And I'm 35. And so at times it's like, and there are days where I'm like, is it ever going to come? But that's where you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other, as my mom likes to say, and keep moving. Because if you stay stagnant, it won't ever come.
It's interesting because before we started this, I was like, Scott, I gotta do this. I've got these questions, they're written out, and anybody who's watched me do any kind of interview, that's not really how I roll. And like you touch on something that made me want to go off script for a second and just throw this idea out and see what comes up for you. And it's around being a provider, right? So I know I would agree for myself as well that a lot of that definition, definitely in the past, came from having a job, making money, all those things. But I was having a conversation actually yesterday, and I've come around to the idea of, usually when we talk about providing, it's providing for someone else, providing for a family or someone that's important to us in our lives. And now I'm thinking, how do you look at providing? If we say I'm a provider, if we take like professional earning money off the table, what's the most important thing that you can provide?
I think I can provide a lot of joy and humor uh, to a relationship, and a lot of wisdom that my disability has given me, and the experience of living with my disability has given me, that others have told me is really valuable. And so I I know I do bring a lot to the table when it comes to romantic relationships. Uh, so I know I've got a lot going on uh, for myself, and yeah, it's just like I said, for me, and I know even for you too, as you just mentioned, it is tough to get over that. Oh, I gotta take care of the finances, uh, and but to your point, maybe I should.
Yeah, it's just something that we all get to look at, I think, because who knows? Everybody's answer is going to be different. But I think that segues beautifully into the next couple of questions. And so, my next question for you is, what is one message that you believe society is getting wrong about masculinity and disability?
That the two are mutually exclusive. That because you have a disability, uh, that means you need somebody to take care of you all the time, and that you should be treated like a child or pitied, because that's one thing that I know about both of us, Nathan. And I have said over and over and over again in the groups that I lead and the conversations that I've had, disability and pity don't have to go together. You and I are not here to be pitied. We don't have time for it. We have a way too much that we bring to the table for somebody to treat us that way. And you know what? I've grown a lot over the last 7 years, and I've come to realize, if somebody can't see everything I have to offer, that's their problem, not mine. And I think that is the biggest issue when it comes to masculinity and disability, really, is oftentimes by society as a whole. They don't see us as truly adults or men, because disability kind of trumps that. And the pity kicks in and kind of, I think, takes that away from us in other people's eyes. That doesn't mean we have to buy into it or feed into it,
Yeah.
because I don't.
I yeah, this is this is great, man, and you're driving me to ask other questions because I want to know, since you brought it up, what does it mean to be pitied from your perspective? What does that look like?
I think it looks like not being taken seriously and just people kind of treating you with kid gloves. To give an example, uh, teachers in school at times would think, when I come into their classroom, what is he doing here? He doesn't belong here. And automatically lower the bar for me. Especially, I don't know what it was about English teachers, but especially, I even had an English teacher in college tell me at the end of the year, I took my English class split up into 2 semesters. He told me at the end of the year, Scott, you did a lot for me. You showed me that people with disabilities like still have a brain and can think. I'm like, yeah. And this was somebody getting a master's who said this to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that shows me that attitude of disability is less than and they're capable of less. So we have to lower the bar so it's easier for them to clear is pervasive no matter what level of education you have, socioeconomic level, it doesn't matter. It's just
Yeah.
ingrained in society. And um, and then also to, I would say, and I don't really have this much anymore, I think, since I'm an adult, but as when I was a kid, other kids would just come up and start pushing my chair or physically helping me without asking me, and not giving me that agency to say, I'm okay, I don't need help, because they just
Yeah.
assumed out of, oh, I've got to help this kid,
Yeah.
that I would want help. And lastly, this one doesn't happen now. Part of me wish it did, but it doesn't happen anymore. Um, and Nathan, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but as a kid, I'd be out in public and people would just randomly come up to me when I was by myself. Like if my mom was in the restroom and I was waiting outside the bathroom, or
Mm-hmm.
even come up to her while we were at dinner and just hand her money.
Like,
And and she would ask me, when she saw me again, she's like, "Where'd you get that money?" I'm like, "Some lady just handed it to me. I don't know." And it's not like it's not like I had a sign like, please, I'm hungry, please spare some change. Like I'm not out there panhandling. I'm just sitting there waiting for my mom, and it was weird.
so yeah, man, that's so interesting. First, I want to say you are definitely not the only person that shared that experience with me. I've never experienced that in my life. I've always been the person that's been the target of people coming up and asking me for money. And
Really?
yeah.
Huh.
And I think that, I mean, there's tons of things we could get into there. I think just real quickly that one of the reasons is they notice somebody who's a lot slower. Like I can't, I can't quote
Oh, okay.
get away from them. Like I'll
You
have
mean
to
like
deal
homeless
with them.
people?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, 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 yeah. Okay.
But I've never had anybody say, "Hey, you look like you need some money."
Yeah, not now that I'm an adult and I could actually use it. It doesn't happen anymore. But
Yeah.
after a while, my mom would just get to the point of like, she would kind of try and fight with him for years. But after a while, she just got to the point of saying, "Thanks, you just paid for dinner." Like, and she would just use the cash that they gave her for the tip, or even sometimes it was enough to pay for the meal. You know, so
Yeah.
like if people are gonna
And
be that way, be like, okay, sure, we don't need your money, but we'll take it.
yeah, and that goes into like if it happens enough, you kind of learn how you have to handle it so you're not spending all that energy being like, no, don't. Just be like, okay, thanks, appreciate it. Um, and I love those stories that you've shared for that. And so the next question I have for you is, again, it's one message, but this time I want to talk to you directly about what's one message you believe that you're getting wrong when it comes to masculinity and disability.
Um, I would say that and it's something that I am still working on. I've improved a lot, but it's really more still around dating and having to deprogram the message that, oh, I'm just always going to be somebody's friend and they're never going to see me as more than um because of my disability. And I've had a couple of opportunities recently that I haven't stepped into, but it's like, oh, okay. I guess I need to stop automatically friend zoning people because I was the one that was stuck in the friend zone for years. So I've just kind of learned to live there, and automatically kind of put myself there because I think, they're not going to even see me that way because of my disability. And I think this is something that I have felt at times, and I'm working to get over it, and I've pretty much gotten over it, but it's still there at times. Just the thought of our lives are really hard because of our disabilities, and it's like sometimes we don't even want to do it. So why would anybody else willingly sign up to like take it on too? You know, and like that it feels unfair to even want to bring somebody else into this until at least until things are more established or whatever. And that's one message that I get across to other people with disability, or try to get across to other people with disabilities and chronic illnesses. Like, there will absolutely be people, and there are people who will see you as somebody they want to get to know in a romantic way, in an intimate way, and you have to have the courage to let them. You know, the same girls that rejected me in high school, once they've gone through some bad relationships, the really nice guy in a wheelchair starts to look pretty good. Like they grow up and realize it's just a part of life, and we have to grow with them in order to take advantage of those opportunities when they do come, because they will come. So
And
that's something
so
I'm still working on.
what do you think is required for you, like in moving forward, when those next opportunities do come? What do you think's required of you to take that step and not automatically put yourself in the friend zone as the automatic response that you would have had in the past?
Um, I would think just actually having a moment to take a step back and have a conversation with myself and say, look, this girl's awesome. Like, she sees you as more than just a friend. Like, she's giving you an opportunity. You need to give her an opportunity as well. And really, and Nathan, you and I are both coaches. This is something that I coach uh, some of the guys that I work with on, is especially when it comes to relationships. First of all, taking things slow. That would be a tip. Not rushing into things and getting too excited. But also always having that consistent dialogue with yourself and frankly with her, you know? Um, but always taking a step back and saying, okay, where are we really in this relationship? And like, is this something that I want to pursue and that I ought to pursue, or not? And really, disability, if she doesn't see it as a problem, why should I? And really kind of having that internal dialogue with myself. I think I need to do a better job at that.
Mm, I love that. All right, gonna shift gears a little bit and kind of speaking to men in general. What do you think is the most challenging thing to talk about as a man, and what would make it easier to talk about?
Mm. I think really just the most challenging thing to talk about as a man really is just vulnerability in general, emotions, and especially amongst each other, having real conversations instead of just, hey, you know, the Lakers were great last night. And I mean, ha- creating that safe space and having a group of men to actually relate to, um, is crucial, because that's something that women do really well and they do all the time. But we as men aren't often taught to be vulnerable with each other. And no wonder relationships are struggling, because if we can't be vulnerable with each other, how can how can we be vulnerable with our partners? You know? Um so I think that is um one thing that's really difficult. And just being generally saying, "Hey man, I'm struggling." Whether it be emotionally, financially, whatever, just being willing to say I'm struggling, because we talked about it earlier, the need to feel like I'm holding things down and I got it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're all human and we all struggle no matter what, and it's okay. And I think we as men need to create spaces where we allow for vulnerability and deeper connection and conversation beyond the surface.
So, with all that being said, what does a safe space look like to you?
I think a safe space for me uh, looks like somebody who, or a space in which I'm with somebody, like, not that they don't see my disability, like, they acknowledge it. They're like, it's a thing, but that's not all Scott has to offer. And he's
Um,
a person and a man who just happens to have a disability, but he's still human. And we can talk about that stuff. And also somebody at the, you know, flipping the coin to the other side of the coin, um, somebody who is, if they don't experience a disability, somebody who is just frankly willing to listen and learn from my experience, because you and I have talked about this before, Nathan. Like, there are days where having a disability just sucks. It does. And it's okay. Um, because it's part of the human experience, and it's just tough some days, and I need to be able to say, "Hey, I'm having a tough day," or, "I'm processing this because of my disability," and just having somebody to bounce that stuff off of, even if they don't provide any feedback, just somebody to kind of talk to about that stuff is invaluable, and that's what I really appreciate about your friendship, uh, along with some of the other guys that we have in our tribe of men with disabilities, where we can talk about that stuff openly and honestly and say, like, I'm normally a really positive guy, but today just sucks,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Hey, you know what's interesting about what you said there to me is even in thinking about some of those conversations that we do have, we also still just bust each other's balls
exactly.
about the hard day, and oh, it's not that bad sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point because I think that that's part of it too. And that's how men communicate. We need to be able
Yeah.
to, bust each other's chops. Because that's that because honestly when you're having a tough day, I like getting burned a little bit because it gives me some perspective of, oh, first of all, I can laugh about this.
Yeah.
Secondly, it immediately snaps me out of it and says, "Oh, wait, this isn't that bad. Like, there's going to be another day tomorrow and it'll be better, you know?" So that's
Yeah.
important too. I'm glad you brought that up.
Um, yeah, I got just a couple more questions for you. I want to know who's a man that you admire and why?
Who is a, I would say, my friend Paul Leffler is a broadcaster here in Fresno, and doesn't have a disability, but he is a man who uh, I look up to and admire very much. He's somebody of great faith and integrity, good family man, and somebody who, like I said, doesn't have a disability, but has done a really good job of creating a safe space for me to just be vulnerable. And I've literally been on the phone with him, like crying my eyes out because I've applied for so many jobs and I'm freaking out about the future, or, what's going to happen to me if something happens to my mom. And he's just sat there and listened. He doesn't have a lot to offer, um, at least from the disability standpoint, but he's just able to lend a uh, kind ear and a soft shoulder to say it's okay. And then also he always kind of points me towards, you know, God, and we've been able to kind of grow uh through that process together. So he's a good mentor of mine. And then I would also add my brother as well, and he's been a good sounding board for uh me over the years, and still is, even though we live in different states. Same sort of thing. When I'm having a tough day, I can call him, and he may not completely understand, um, but he's really good at lending, a kind ear and a soft shoulder to say, like, things are gonna be okay, and we'll figure it out. So, yeah, my brother Randy's been good for that as well.
All right, man. I got two more questions. First one is if you could leave a message for your younger self, what would that message say?
Uh, Funny. This is something that I've thought a lot about over the years, and I've shared before. I would say to my younger self, um, you think you've been through a lot, but things are going to get a lot harder. And you're much stronger than you think you are. You don't even know how strong you are yet. And you're gonna need and use every ounce of strength that God gave you to get through the road ahead. Uh, Also, go to therapy and start processing some of this stuff. You don't really understand all of the weight that you're carrying, and you don't need to carry it. It's not yours to carry. It's stuff that other people have put on you, that it's their expectations of you and their weight that they see when they look at you, but it's not yours and you don't need to carry it. Lastly, and I think this kind of uh, puts a nice little bow on a theme here. You know, personally, people do see for you being under discipline, um, and there will absolutely be to give you a shot, and you need to have the courage. You have a really good heart, and people see that. Uh, so do the work that you need to do to heal from um, all of the weight that I mentioned earlier, so you can more easily let someone in. And then lastly, things are going to look different for you, and it's okay. You don't have to have everything figured out. And you can take some chances with dating and your, you know, personal life while also simultaneously still trying to figure out your professional life. Not everybody has everything figured out, and it's okay. And I love you, and I'm proud of you. But you got a long road ahead of you, and it's gonna be okay.
Now, what part of that do you need to remember as the man you are today?
Uh, Kind of. I would say not so much the therapy stuff because I've healed from a lot of that. I've done a lot of heavy lifting around that. I would say just remembering that people see me for more than just my disability, and I need to know that it's okay to let them in, uh, and that I am really strong. I know this, but it's always important to remember that, and that I love myself and I'm proud of myself. Excuse me.
Yeah. All right, and my final question for you today is, what do you want to be remembered for?
You know, that's an interesting question because I have actually thought a lot about my legacy, the legacy that I'm leaving. And I personally think that the world would be a much better place if more people considered legacy on a daily basis and what they want to be remembered for. Some people think it's ridiculous because no matter what you've done in life, at some point you're going to be forgotten. I mean, unless you've done something really, really great. I think even at a point, you know, the great Steve Jobs, I'm talking to you on an iMac right now. I think he's going to be forgotten at some point. Um, but I think legacy is one of the more important guiding um, things that we can think about on a daily basis. And so I want to be remembered as somebody who saw the best in people and somebody who rooted for people and somebody who is there to help even when seemingly he can't help himself with some of the situations that and circumstances that he's in. Uh Somebody who is just always willing to try things and experiment, and ultimately somebody who doesn't give up. And honestly, I think I'm doing a really good job now at doing that. And lastly, just somebody who uh, reflects the love of Jesus on a day in day out basis, and regardless of somebody's faith, somebody who is, you know, tolerant and accepting of people as people, regardless of their racial backgrounds. Somebody who just loves people.
Scott, man, I want to say I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything that you did. I think this was a very powerful conversation, and I know that people are going to take a lot away from it. It's going to cause some reflection for lots of people. And I think you being courageous coming on and actually modeling a lot of the things that you talked about in the conversation when it comes to vulnerability, when it comes to strength and all those things. I think you are going to help shift the perception of what masculinity and disability looks like. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing you with us.
Hey, thanks, Nathan. I really appreciate the opportunity. And just to uh, wrap it up, and I'll leave you with this. For anybody who's really having a tough time uh, right now, who's really going through something, I'll leave you with my favorite quote from Dr. Robert Schuller: "Tough times don't last, but tough people do."